Today's video, I'm going to be discussing something somewhat controversial in the Fallout community, and that is...
politics.
In case my mic didn't pick that up, that's right, I'm talking about politics and Fallout. Since I've been posting about the Fallout TV show, I've been getting a number of comments from people saying that the show better not be political, and I'm here to remind you, I'm not trying to be bombastic or controversial, that Fallout is political. Go to the original developers of the game. They've also said this themselves. This is nothing new, but we're going to explore this topic a bit more while also playing Fallout 4. If you're new to the channel or if you've been watching casually, be sure to press subscribe. I'm trying to get monetized on this channel so I could do more deep dive videos. And you know what helps is being monetized, being able to pay editors, and having more time. So if you haven't already, watch a couple of my videos. Enjoy. And without further ado, let's get into it, Wastelanders. I overall don't discuss politics on my page, and I'm not going to discuss necessarily too in-depth in this video, but I am going to provide you evidence on how Fallout itself is a political video game. And in my opinion, there's nothing wrong with including politics in a video game. Like any media, I want it to challenge my way of thinking to some extent or make me feel something. You don't always have to challenge my way of thinking to make me feel something, but, you know, Fallout does that. It's for adults, not for children. There's nothing wrong with including some political ideas or concepts in the games themselves, and thus the TV show as well. So I got a few comments not too long ago talking about how the original Fallouts and the modern Fallouts weren't political beyond Red Scare elements. If you're not aware what the Red Scare is, it was the fear of communism that occurred in the 20th century. Go watch some YouTube history videos on that. I'm not here to educate you on that. However, I responded to this video and I thought this would actually make a good topic for a full video, that the politics of Fallout goes so much further beyond Red Scare elements. I don't know why Moira's not letting me in. So here are some concepts that are covered. So first of all, we're going to talk about the commentary on capitalism, which has been present since the original Fallouts began. That's not enough time. Anyway, there is a commentary on capitalism and driving companies' goals for profit, driving them to do bad things. I ask you to look no further than Vault-Tec, although there are other companies within Fallout that do similar things for similar goals. This is a very clear, to me, comment on capitalism, which also rolls into the commentary of Fallout into consumerism. If you look at overconsumption, it is a big theme throughout Fallout. Having the newer and better thing and more and more and more is something that is a consistent thread throughout this game series. I don't know why Moira won't let me in. It's very odd. Think about the fact that that Fallout, the reason for the bombs dropping is a resource war. And now obviously a lot of these are like corporate greed that caused this to some extent. And, you know, if we were to look into another topic I feel like is heavily covered in the Fallout universe, which is the military industrial complex causing this, the goal of the military, and remember Vault-Tec is a subcontractor of the military, so obviously it would speak to their profit goals that having more war and all of these different things happening would actually benefit them, which is all aspects of when you look into military industrial complex, having more conflict actually leads to more profit for these subcontractors of the military, which is a really interesting topic, especially in US politics. That is something that's super salient, was relatively salient when Fallout came out at the original in 97, but became more and more and more salient as we move on into the future, as we went through the Bush presidency and those wars and continued on with Obama's presidency and all of those conflicts, now obviously rolling through Trump and through Biden to today. It's something that has not slowed down. The military gets billions of dollars of funding, and obviously that funding goes to subcontractors, and this goal of those subcontractors, right, is to be profitable. What makes profit if you're a military subcontractor? for the most part, is conflict, right? I've been a military subcontractor before. Full disclosure, I worked for an environmental consulting firm that managed data with regards to groundwater and air with environmental around military bases, both in the U.S. and around the world. And there was a definite desire for not necessarily conflict, because that's not specifically what we were involved in. We were more involved with remediation of bad practices on these sites, causing contamination of groundwater, soil, etc. And anytime there was more contamination, it was a boon to our industry. It's kind of ironic in my experience, at least in environmental sciences, which is my field. The more that there is environmental disaster, pollution, mismanagement based off companies, the more money that environmental industry makes, which is incredibly fascinating to think about, because it doesn't fully align with the goals of these industries. I think it's very similar for the military industrial complex, and I think that is a lot of what Fallout is commenting on, especially with regards to Vault Tech specifically, which again is a subcontract of the military. They're getting funding from the military in the Fallout universe. Definitely an important thing to consider in my mind. And I honestly think if you're talking about that's another whole video essay you could honestly do on these things, because that is so political in nature. So very, 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 very political. Whether or not you agree with it or disagree with it, that's politics, right? So that is a big one for me specifically. Of course, there is so much more beyond just the military and industrial complex, consumerism, capitalism. So we move into the misuse of technology, also arguably something that Vault Tech does, as well as Brotherhood of Steel after the bombs drop, the Enclave. A lot of these different groups are using this technology for their means. This is something that we see, obviously, in global politics today. It's ever present. Sorry. It's something that is very present in the world. I think it's something that is unavoidable and obviously inherently political. There's going to be arguments and opinions based off of where you stand politically on these things. I'm not here to put in my ideology necessarily to you, but just to point to these things as, yes, that's political in nature, of course. So if we move on from that, I'm just trying to get the cell to reload in the game so I can actually get Moira to open up. I don't know why she's not opening up Greater Side Supply, for a side note. All right. So I don't think I need to get you too much into the misuse of technology. I think that's pretty evident throughout the Fallout games. It is something that is used in numerous quests by numerous factions for their own means, and I think you can extrapolate out how that relates to American politics or global politics pretty easily if you were to just apply a modicum of thought about it. Now, nothing, like, not all politics has to be this, like, overarching, like, heavy-handed commentary where people are saying something super specific about something that clearly relates to present day. Like, I know people are upset with Marvel movies for being very specific, and I think that is part of the beautiful nuance of Fallout. So I suppose I would agree with you if your concern is for these, like, super blunt, basically, like, don't do that specific thing that people are upset about right now. It's not that, but it is more like ideas that get you thinking to some extent, and I think that's what's important with regards to thinking about politics in Fallout. I don't think the Fallout TV show will ever be overhanded in its messaging, but if you find things that have been in the Fallout games overhanded, like, since the beginning, then this might not be it for you, because you may not have perceived it at the time, but this messaging and ideas have always been there in the games, and, you know, what the heck, Moira? What the heck? Unlock? Okay. Ridiculous. Moira is not existing. I'm trying to have a political discussion. And Moira does not want to open the door. Okay, we're... What is going on with this game? That is bizarre. I am so sorry. I'm going to load to the entrance, I suppose. Okay, so moving on beyond that, so those are more of like broad political concepts that are covered in the games. I want to talk about other concepts that are more social in nature, I suppose. So one of the social concepts, I guess, it could be more overarching as well, depending on your perspective, is the hoarding of information. This is something we talk a lot about today in American politics that I think is incredibly fascinating. So if you're hoarding information, things like not releasing information right away. I think we saw a lot of people have concerns about this with regards to the pandemic, or academics speaking in such a way that is not accessible to lay people is another way of like hoarding information. Now, obviously, this happens in Fallout as well. There was a certain sect of people that knew that the bombs were going to be dropped, and there was a group of people who didn't. There was also Vault Tech having all this information about the experiments that would have been conducted on the people in the vaults, not relaying that information to the people. I think you could pull this out to pharmaceutical companies, not telling you all of the negative side effects that could potentially happen from medication, or pushing medication on someone that might not necessarily need it. Despite of these things like that are, to me at least, political in nature. It's unavoidable to look at these things as anything but a political. I mean, if it involves people, it's politics. And I think that's okay, because I think these things actually get you thinking. I didn't really think about the crazy nature of profit-driven companies until I started playing Fallout. I was young when Fallout came out, and it got me thinking. And I think because of the demographics of the people who play video games, statistically speaking, being predominantly male, not always, obviously video games are evolving, but at least in my personal demographics on my Instagram, my TikTok here, it's very male, and it's men from 18 to 34 predominantly. I think it is interesting to include these concepts that might not have like been in people's minds, or might not have been touched on in any other way, because it gets you thinking. Whether you agree or disagree with the commentary they're making, or you don't interpret it that way, is up to you. Remember, opinions, assholes, they all stink, right? All right, so another social concept that I see as covered in Fallout is misinformation. Definitely something that's been discussed quite a bit in American politics recently, in misinformation in the news, people not trusting media, things like that. Super political. There's a lot of misinformation that occurs in Fallout. Of course, Vault Tech is a big proprietor of that. I would argue by extension, the military is to some extent. And then obviously once you're within the wasteland, misinformation is everywhere. It's rife. It is every corner of the waste you could possibly go to is full to the brim of misinformation. Nothing wrong with that, but it is an interesting thing to look at as, oh, that's definitely political too. Another concept that I was discussing, or I was thinking about, was, I don't know if this is like the specific term. I did look it up. It does exist, but is tribalism, and by extension xenophobia, where you are sticking with your group of people and all other groups of people are not okay, or are bad, or are wrong, or dumb, or whatever you want to say. This is something that is super prevalent within Fallout. I mean, if you look at the Brotherhood of Steel, they are a faction that is pretty much rooted in xenophobia against super mutants, against ghouls, against, you know, honestly, just people who don't follow their ideological path. And this kind of is something that is prevalent across different factions, but this is something that is political. It's something that makes you think. Whether or not you extrapolate these topics out into something like race relations or something like that is kind of up to you, but I think it's impossible to avoid that this commentary on xenophobia is something that is definitely mirrors a lot of history in the United States, as well as other countries around the world. Obviously, this is a very American perspective video game, so I'm focused on the US and I'm American, so that is what I think about. But, I mean, you can't avoid looking at how xenophobia in Fallout mirrors xenophobia in real life. I can't, at least. I have a hard time separating a video game into just a work of fiction and not thinking about its impacts on my day-to-day life or its impacts on how I think or anything like that. Again, up to you, but that is another prime example of politics in Fallout. There's also some quest characters, factions, obviously, that are very political. I love saying nothing to him. Sorry, that was just a little side note. But, okay, so one of the biggest things that I think is forgotten is, in the comments that I'm seeing, is specifically about LGBT community and not wanting commentary on that, although this has been something that has been in Fallout since the OG Fallouts. And, you know, in 97, this was not as something that is as prevalent in media as it is today. However, I will remind you that, like, the original creators of Fallout is gay, Tim Kaine, and he's open about it now. He talks about it on his YouTube. He talks about it being gay as a developer of a game. If you haven't watched that, I would go check it out because it's a really compelling video, and I don't want to get into having an argument about this because I think all people are people, but I think that is something that is obviously going to be in the game. It's if you're influenced by the people who develop games are influenced by the people who develop them, and ignoring that is impossible in my mind. Okay, so Veronica herself from Fallout New Vegas obviously is in the Brotherhood of Steel, and her faction, the Brotherhood of Steel, doesn't approve of her lifestyle. I don't necessarily agree with that type of language around it, but that is kind of how it is framed in the video game. But she is told essentially you can't be a lesbian, you can't be gay in this community because their goal is reproduction. As someone who is sterilized due to cancer, you know, reproduction is not always a guarantee, people. But and that is part of why she leaves. She's also connected to Dead Money. If you haven't played those quests and you don't know about that, it's very, I love it. Like, I love that element of the game, because the connection between New Vegas, the main game, and the DLC is just fantastic. Whole other video topic that I could get into down the road, but I do think that that connection is really good, and that commentary on Brotherhood of Steel's ideology is very interesting. And you could agree fully with the Brotherhood of Steel, you could agree fully with Veronica. Wherever you lie on this topic that is now political, I don't necessarily think everything should be political, but it is. Like, it's controversial. It's going to be political. Wherever you lie, right? That's political. If that type of quest was brought into a modern Fallout, I wonder how people would react, how they would say, oh no, Fallout's going political. That's been there since 2010. So just throwing that out there as a big quest that I guess it could be perceived as political, and more evidence that Fallout has been political for a long time. Again, you can lie on whatever side you lie on, but I do think it's impossible to ignore that element of the game. I personally love Veronica. She's one of my favorite companions. I also love Arcade, another favorite companion. That's just a side note. I could do a whole video on how those are the two greatest companions in Fallout New Vegas, and also they are the two members of the LGBT community companions. So just throwing that out there. Obsidian made a choice making those the best companions. I'm just saying, they're great. Okay, so we're moving on into other factions, companions, whatnot, that are inherently political. Caesar's Legion as a whole is a super political faction. I think it's impossible to look at Caesar's Legion and not see, like, politics within it. Oh, I didn't up my explosives. I'm a goober. So Caesar, you know, when you consider Caesar's Legion, you have to look at the fact that Caesar has this ideology specifically around what is going on with Crater Side Supply? This is upsetting. I'll have to figure that out later. But if you look at Caesar, you have to, I mean, there is so much rooted in his politics, but I'm just gonna stick with the sexism of it all. Caesar's Legion is incredibly sexist. As a female person, I hate the word female, as a womanish person, a feminine person, there we go, that's a better word, playing Fallout New Vegas and siding with Caesar's Legion was one of the hardest things I had to do, because it's hard hearing that language thrown at you so consistently throughout the game, and I know my audience is predominantly male, but try and see it from my perspective. Getting called terrible things and told sexist things throughout the game is upsetting. But that's part of it. That's the goal, to show how this faction is, and that is political. I know, we're here, we're talking more politics. Like,
now, I don't expect much from strangers.
that is something that is so rooted in Fallout New Vegas and in the communities that discuss Fallout New Vegas, that I think it's impossible to avoid the politics of it all. And there is commentary on how Caesar's Legion is better or worse because the NCR has taxes. Another realm of politics, taxes. Taxes are political. Woo! But it's impossible to look at that sexism within there, and even the sexism within the Brotherhood of Steel or different factions that have values that they impart on the women of their factions that they don't necessarily put on the men, or who can have what role in what faction. All of these things are political things, especially to me as like a feminine person sitting playing these games, especially as a young person playing these games. It was cool to see these topics discussed in a video game because it was something that impacted me in my day-to-day life as a woman existing in the world, you know? So these things are very political. But it's something that I don't see discussed as much. But it's there, and it's very salient throughout these games, this element of sexism throughout the games, and hearing sexist comments and gross comments and offensive comments. I mean, here we're in Megaton right now trying to figure out why Moira won't let me into her house. Come on, Moira, what the heck? But there's Jericho, who is accused of R-wording people, and like all of these things are something that's so salient in today's discourse that looking at it in Fallout and saying, oh, it shouldn't be there, I mean, what would it be without these topics? All right, so moving along from Caesar's Legion, I mean, that's an entire 20 videos on the sexism within Caesar's Legion and his values and his ideology. Also, a lot of the stands of Caesar's Legion, I think, forget that for the most part, Caesar, like, yeets everybody, or brainwashes them, or, you know, also enslaves them. Like, guys, trust me, it's a very small percentage of people who actually make it to the high ranks in Caesar's Legion and are living quasi-comfortably. I guess to continue with Caesar's Legion, though, the limitation on access to medication or certain chems is another interesting topic that could be considered political as well. There are definitely religious groups in the world today that limit access to medication, or there's definitely ideas around vaccination. All of these things political. They're, you know, quasi-connected. Whether you would choose to assign value to your real world from video games is up to you, but ignoring the metaphors and that are there, I mean, you're just choosing to ignore them. Nothing wrong with it. Sometimes I like to unplug and just play, but, you know, they're there. And I think that's interesting, so to some extent. I'm so upset Moira won't let me in here. I know it's really hard to play a game while also talking, as I find during all my live streams when I'm just like this for a little bit. But her not letting me in to this door is violently upsetting me right now. Moira's like, don't talk politics in my creator side supply. Okay. Okay. It's upsetting. Okay, so moving on from Caesar's Legion, Joshua Graham's backstory and what happened to him, I think, is somewhat political. That's another deep dive that could take many, many videos to cover, but I guess in a more broad sense, his religious motivations is interesting to me, and I think even the discussion of religion could be considered political in some circles, depending on your group. And just even the connection to Mormonism is very interesting and to me political and could be offensive to people, right? So that's another one that I think of. Oh my God, why am I shooting this? That's in these games. Okay, so moving on from Joshua. So Vault-Tec's motivation for profit, fueling tensions, etc. We discussed ad nauseum at the beginning of this video. There's two other factions that I think are big, and I've discussed a little bit in this video as well, and that is the Enclave, their motivations, as well as the Brotherhood of Steel. Both of those factions are super political in nature and could be considered commentary for many things. Again, it depends on your value system and what you want to assign value to. But there's a lot of subtle and obvious connections to politics throughout these games that I think, if you choose to ignore it, is a personal choice you're making. But the fact that they're there and have been there since the beginning is something to be considered, you know? And you got to consider also that the groups of people that go into making these games are not all going to be politically aligned with you. How do you sneak in this game? I'm forgetting. There we go. And that's okay. Like, it is impossible to create media without having some of your opinion or, you know, your own personal politics, as much as you try to avoid it, is something that is so salient in your own life. It's impossible not to insert it into a game, and nor do I think you should, because it's something that's part of who you are as a person, and it's a good thing to me, because challenging ideas is not a negative thing, and I try and do that in my day-to-day life, and I do find it challenging occasionally, and the TV show is not going to be without that, and it's okay. Like, guys, it's okay. We'll get over it, right? I think what is going to upset people is going to be if it's ham-fisted, or if it's, like, really heavy-handed, or if people are just saying, like, you can't have that due to blah, 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 whatever. You know, like, that is where I guess I would draw the line with you as well. But I think that the commentary that is made in existing Fallout media is relatively subtle, you know? Like, I keep going back to Veronica's storyline and backstory. You only get this information through, you know, a handful of conversations, but it's there. And I think things like that, similar to that, not necessarily only about that topic, it's something to remember that, like, there is politics in these games, and it's okay. And there will be politics in the show, and it's okay. Whether you agree, disagree with whatever leaning they're going towards, I think that the Vault is going to be about some kind of infection. We're seeing a lot of people with masks on and gurneys and things like that. I do think that's going to be some messaging of it, and I think it could end up relating to coronavirus and how it was dealt with by different groups of people, and I think that might upset people, and I think it also, you know, might make for good television to some extent, because challenging ideas is never, in my mind, necessarily a bad thing. It is just a thing that exists, and I would rather have something thought-provoking than something vanilla. And because of the politics of Fallout being so rooted in what the game is, it's not something that bothers me personally, but it might bother you, and you know what? You're entitled to your opinion, and I'm sure you will let it fly in the comments, but please just remember to be kind and quasi-respectful, because we all have different ideas. The community is incredibly diverse, but we are all here enjoying these games, and it's okay. Okay? So I guess that's all I have to say. I have no idea why Moira is not letting me into her house. It's really upsetting. But thank you for watching. I'm sorry it was kind of boring gameplay. It's really hard for me to talk and play games at the same time. I'll try and get better at that. So let me know what you think. What is something that's political in Fallout that I may have left out of the video? And make it a great day, y'all. Seriously, like, have a good day. Have a fabulous day. Stay safe in the wasteland, and I will catch you in the next video. Like, comment, subscribe. Love you.